Welcome to the Jennie Weeks Podcast. I am thrilled to be hosting today because with every episode, we strengthen our listeners' relationship with money, we build clarity through shared experiences, and become more deliberate with our financial decisions. As we work toward that clarity, please remember that this show provides financial education and inspiration only. It's not intended as a personal investment, legal, or tax advice. Please consult with your team of professional advisors before making any financial decisions. And if becoming financially savvy is important to you, then you should be listening to this episode today. Before we begin, I want to ask you something. Are the choices that you are making supporting the life you want? Are you using your resources to create meaning? Are you aware of all the opportunities to create wealth? Are you really creating your best life? I encourage you to think deeply about this as it relates to this topic, teaching our children about money. So today we are joined by Alyson Jones. She is here to share her expertise on a topic many parents find challenging: how and when to talk to your children about money. Navigating these conversations from early childhood through adolescence and into adulthood is essential for building a healthy relationship with money, something we want for the next generation. This is a wonderful opportunity to learn from Alyson's insights so you can feel empowered to lead these discussions with confidence and help your family avoid common pitfalls in financial communication. Before we hear from Alyson, I want to share some research about speaking to our children about money. Research shows that kids start forming their attitudes about money much earlier than most parents think, often as young as 3 to 5. These conversations we have at home, even in everyday moments like shopping or talking about choices, play a huge role in shaping how we understand money later in life. When these conversations happen early and grow with them, kids tend to develop stronger financial confidence and healthier habits. But on the flip side, avoiding the topic or introducing it with stress or pressure can lead to anxiety, negative beliefs about money, or avoidance of the topic altogether. So let's dig into this topic and discuss how we can create ongoing, age-appropriate discussions that help our children build confidence around money. I am so excited to welcome Alyson Jones here today. She is a highly respected therapist, educator, and best-selling author. She speaks and lectures across North America and is the clinical director at Alyson Jones and Associates. Alyson is a child and family therapist, parenting coordinator, mediator, collaborative therapist, and child specialist, and a friend of mine. She's got over 30 years experience in the field of individual, couple, family, and child therapy, and was an adjunct faculty member at Adler University for several years, and is highly involved in training for professionals in many fields. And you sometimes might see her on CTV Morning Live. She's featured often, sharing her extensive knowledge. Let's please welcome Alyson.
Hello, Jenny. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, welcome to the Jennie Weeks Podcast.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Great. So when I first asked you to do this, you said you were really excited about this topic. So tell me a little bit about your family and what makes you get so excited about this topic.
Well, I am really excited about this topic because I don't think people talk about it enough. I think that being able to lay a foundation for financial literacy for our children is incredibly important. And most people just aren't doing it. So for myself, this is not just me as a family child therapist. It's also me as a mother, right? I have 2 children, twins. They're 27 now. And so, I always kind of joke about it being my own little twin study, right? and, and I've been able to apply some of these ideas on my own children. And I have to say, Jenny, the results have been pretty good. Like, I have 2 27-year-olds who have a literacy when it comes to finances, have goals, and are thinking about things, and know how to delay gratification in order to get the goals that they want. So we started young. We started young having these conversations. And I think that's one of the things that people miss sometimes is they think they have to wait until their children are in their teens or they have a job or something like that. Whereas the conversations can start right from the beginning.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So you talked about it earlier. Tell me a little bit about delayed gratification and its role in early childhood and beyond.
I think part of the focus of this particular podcast today is around, how quick to spending our, generation coming up can be, right? But there's lots of studies that show that if a child can delay gratification, they used to they had this study where if you wait, there's a cookie sitting on the desk, right? But if you wait for a few moments, you can get two cookies, right? And then they did long-term studies on those children to see, did this translate into the future where these were children, the ones that could delay gratification, that they could actually delay it more in the future, and they could, right? So being able to teach our children that they need to wait for something, they need to plan for it, and that there is reward for that planning, and that feels really good, right? Is a wonderful thing. So you can start, right?
With a cookie.
With a cookie, right? Because you can start with a cookie in the sense of teaching them delayed gratification. And so, the cookie might be a currency for a young child, but as children get older, it might be their allowance, or it might be the goals that they're setting, right? Where you help them learn that to wait and plan for the goal is actually incredibly rewarding. And in fact, research shows us, Jenny, that the more we work for something and put effort into it, the more we appreciate it. So those young children that waited for the two cookies enjoyed them more than the kid who just, went in for that first cookie, right? Like they actually have more satisfaction in the experience. And it's the same thing with money when, children and youth are older, is when I've worked for that thing, I've planned for it. I want to save for this new video game that I want, and when they get it, they feel accomplished and they feel competent. But sometimes if parents just give it to them immediately without them working, not only do we create entitled children, we don't teach them the skills that they need for, financial and sometimes emotional literacy in life.
Yeah. That makes me think a little bit too about autonomy for children. And it's something I think every child seeks from an early age. But as parents, I've always found that it's hard to know when your child is old enough to do something.
Right.
I always use the dishwasher example. You can go to any home and have a dinner party or whatnot, or have dinner, as you do throughout your lifetime. And you'll notice that some parents ask children to clear the dishes and some don't. And I always think, why are these 9-year-olds not clearing the plates?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I actually think the parents just forgot their kids grew up and were old enough to do it.
Right. Right.
And I think that's one of the pieces that is missing also in financial literacy is that like when children can count on their fingers, they're ready to start to learn. And the more autonomy you give them, like you said, involved in the decisions, I think the more response that you're going to have.
That is not just true from lived experience. That's true from research, Jenny. Like that is what really happens. And you're absolutely right, is that parents sometimes just lose sight of it, or they get so used to doing things for their kids, right? And when we get children involved, whether it be unloading the dishwasher or whether it be planning for a financial goal or something that they want to do, we give them the message back that we believe in them and their ability. When we don't have them doing things, the message we're giving them is, I'm not so sure you can do it. So I encourage parents to stretch forward. Like, it's okay. If you find out your child can't quite handle what you're asking for them, then just side by side help them learn the skills, right? It lets us know where the deficits are, and then we can start to fill. If they can actually do these things, then great. That is another basis for competency and actually their self-esteem, so it is giving them agency and letting them know that we believe in their ability.
Yeah, true. And our own delayed gratification. If you put the work in early, then then they'll be
Yeah.
doing the dishes later, right? But it's
You know,
hard work to teach your children the skills. It's easier to do it
and
yourself. And
that's
I
the
think that's with money, with everything,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, it is.
sitting down and doing the planning. Okay, I've
Mhm.
got a really good one for you. Okay. And this comes from experience in my own family. Do you think that children are born with different personality traits that cause them to be savers versus spenders? Or do you think it's a learned behavior?
Well, I think it's a combination in some ways. We are wired in certain ways, and there are some children that are more, let's say, cautious in nature, right? And so they may be ones that go gravitate towards being careful, right, in what they do, and that translates into them being careful with their spending, careful with their money, maybe careful with their choices. And then there's the ones that sometimes are very impulsive, right, and aren't thinking about it a great deal and will jump, right into it. I grew up in a family where, you know, I grew up in Saskatchewan. My parents didn't have a lot of money, right? But my mom had a job when she was younger in a bank, so she learned some financial literacy. And even though she didn't have an education specifically to financial things, she taught us, she talked to us about money. And I think I was the only kid whose mom was talking to them about money, right? And my mom was kind of careful and she was thoughtful. And those things translated to me. And I translated those same things to my children. Now my husband grew up in a family where they didn't discuss money. They had a bit more money than my family did, but they didn't talk about it. And my husband has said one of the greatest gifts he got from both my mother and myself was learning how to talk about money. So now we talk as a family, and we have talked to our children ever since the get-go. And in fact, I'll give a little tip that I think is really great. We got our children involved, and we wanted it to be simple enough for them to actually learn and understand. So I have a kind of theory, and not everybody agrees with it, but is that, I believe in a home that you all contribute. And I never paid my children for short chores in my house, right? I felt like that was just, they were going to unload the dishwasher. Let's just put it that way,
Nobody
right?
pays you for your chores.
Nobody pays me for their, so I didn't for theirs. But they did get an allowance with the purpose that it was to teach them financial literacy. And they knew it. And I talked to them about it. And when they were young, what we started, we basically had 3 jars, right? And we had 3 jars, which was short-term kind of savings, long-term savings, and the third jar was contribution. And so the short-term savings would be if they wanted something, some new stuffy or whatever it was, their thing they wanted, so that they could have that agency. They could have the autonomy and choice, right? Because when they have their skin in the game, they are more invested in it. The long-term savings was to teach them that delayed gratification, that idea, and also I would talk to them. I wanted, to let them know this is also something you can work towards your college education. Even when they were little, I was talking to them about that. Even though I knew my husband and I were also saving for that, right? It wasn't like we were going to be dependent on their,
just
dollar a week for, college education. But I wanted them to feel like they had the ability to contribute. And then contribution, because I believe in that. And I believe that people that are lucky and privileged enough to have means in their life, that we need to contribute to others and find ways of doing that are meaningful for us. So for the children, when, about every half a year, when they'd have that money collected in the contribution jar, they got to choose what they wanted to contribute it to. Did they want to contribute it to the animal shelter? Did they want to contribute it to, something to do with Girl Guides, whatever it was that their interest was? And again, that was activating their autonomy. And in the whole time, I think I'm trying to teach them how to be good citizens of the world, but I'm also teaching them how to create, a dependence, an independence for themselves, and a sense of empowerment that they can make these decisions.
That is absolutely brilliant, Alyson.
Thanks.
So how I talk about money is in terms of resources. It's our resource, right?
Yes.
And it's a resource you can spend. That's jar number 1. short
Yeah.
term.
Yes.
Save, jar number
Yes.
3,
Yeah. Yeah.
or give away,
Yeah.
which is your contribution.
Exactly.
And really that's ultimately the 3 choices that you have. And when you give it away, you give it to your children, you can give it to your, in all different areas. So I can picture one of your twins or both of them, going
Yeah.
with their, allowance, or maybe it's also a gift from grandma or something, and
Exactly.
choosing which jar to put it in and thinking about it. Oh, I really
Exactly.
want that. Oh, but I should. So, because that's what we do on a daily basis. And that's how we get good at money, is that decision every day. Are we going to spend it? Are we going to save it? Or are we going to give it away?
And I think those
And you've
decisions.
done it for 3-year-olds.
Yeah.
I
For
think I
very
should
young
do this for
children.
adults.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing, is you can those skills we can use those skills whether we're 5 or whether we're 55, right? Like, or whether we're 85. Like, we can use those same skills. And if you get a basis of understanding for that, the next steps are not so intimidating.
Absolutely. So I my next question was about, let's start with the preschool years, right?
Right.
What should we be doing during the preschool years? So that's obviously the allowance. And I love that we have something people can walk away with preschoolers. And honestly, this does not take up a lot of time. And I
No.
also think it solves the problem now of the temper tantrum, because I got news. They have temper tantrums at 7, 8, and 9 too, right?
Yes. Right.
Because then it's, are you bringing your spending kitty to the grocery store with us today?
Right.
Yeah. And so, and they understand that it comes from somewhere, right?
Yeah, it doesn't just magically appear.
Yeah. So, okay, another question. At a young age, when have we gone, there's this boundary. When have we gone too far
Right.
in early education with the teaching piece?
Well, there's big signals and small signals, right? Like, you've gone too far sometimes when you're losing the kids, right? When you can tell that they're just glazed over,
Yes.
and the younger the kids, sometimes the shorter this needs to be. It doesn't need to be a long, it's not like a whole lesson plan. It's little bits, right? So paying attention, reading the room, if you're losing their interest, when it's no longer relevant, contextual, or fun for them, it's, you're going to lose them. Right. But, when they get older, right, it's like when they start having that pushback, or they're like, rejecting what you're saying. Right. The other thing is, we also have to watch that in the conversations and the leadership we're trying to do around finances and planning and financial literacy for kids, is that we don't overwhelm them with the adult stress or responsibility. Right. Like, we don't want them to feel like, if we're stressed and then we're oversharing with them, no, you can't have that because we've got we don't have enough money for this, or we don't have this. Like, it can actually really turn them off it becomes a painful thing, right? And it turns them off of trying to learn and be open to it. So we have to be careful about the content too. We need to approach it in a way that is age appropriate, and that we're not burdening them with, adult stress. And in particular, and this isn't exclusive to, but in particular, when it's separated families and things like that, we don't want to be putting the kids in the financial turmoil we might be experiencing if we're trying to settle something with our ex, or if there's negotiations going on, because that can really turn young people off of trying to learn or deal with money. So it has to be age appropriate, contextual to them, and separate from the financial stress of the adults.
Yeah, okay. I want to park that, because I think there's a something to that topic there, and I wanted to share another usable, like your cookie jar that happened for me. I wanted to share a brief story. When I think I was about 9 or 10 years old. So I'm going into that sort of prepubescent time. And my mom had a budget that she got from my dad, because she was a homemaker. And we went with the neighbors, just the moms, on a trip to the Oregon coast. And we were on a budget. And my mom said to us, and I distinctly remember, she said, okay, we're going to be on a budget. And our budget is, I don't know, it's like $150 a day. Maybe it was less. Not really that important. She says, and every day we're all going to choose how we're going to spend it, right? Do we want to pack sandwiches to the beach? Do we want to go for lunch? Do we want to do an activity? And Alyson, it was the first time that I was invited into the conversation of, number one, choosing what we're going to do that day. And I can tell you, I did not find it burdensome at all. I remember thinking it was a challenge. And we had some autonomy over it. So I don't know if that's something that you ever did with your kids, but I know some families are afraid to go on vacations because you have to say no a lot sometimes because of the budgets.
No, and that's a really great point, and good for your mom, right? That was a great contextual way for you to learn and be engaged. And also, she didn't it wasn't just her feeling burdened by this. It was her engaging you guys in conversations, and you guys having, again, that skin in the game where you're like, hey, we can choose to do this activity and have sandwiches, or we can choose to go for lunch, And so that is a brilliant way to do that. And I think that, we certainly did the same thing in the sense of, here's what our trip is, what the plans are, what do you, we would try to involve them in the fun planning part and the things where they would get to choose, how they wanted to invest their part. Of course, there were parts we took care of, right? But the ones that were really relevant to them were very engaging and exciting for them. So this is the thing, is you want to pivot off of a child's natural curiosity and their natural playfulness and their natural desire to be involved. Those are all natural. And that's whether they're 5, 10, 15, 25, all of those ages.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to just pivot a little bit here. I want to go back to the separation question. For those listening, if you don't know, Alyson and I, that's how we know each other. We work within a collaborative separation process, and I work as a financial specialist there. And one of the things that I do often see when families separate, and this can actually be for families that are still married too, which is that, children have, they have an expectation to be able to participate in all the different extracurricular activities. Right. And some families really need to make choices about how they're going to afford that, particularly in separation when you're now sharing income across 2 households. But the same thing happens as well when you're having, even in one household, not all children can afford to have horses, for example, right? Right. So I guess my question to you is how do you have that conversation with, I still think we're in sort of pre-adolescence. How do you have that conversation with children when their friends might be getting more, or you're having to make a choice about something because there isn't enough, or there may be enough, but you need to allocate that to something else?
Yeah, and that's the basis for critical thinking. Right? Again, and if our children learn critical thinking in one aspect of their life, they're going to be able to apply it to other aspects. Critical thinking is an extremely important foundational skill for satisfaction and success in life, right? So there are times you look at it and there isn't, and it's not good for kids anyways to get everything that they want. Right? It's about them getting what they need, not what they want. And so to mature, children need to learn futility. They need to learn that's disappointing that I can't do that, or I can't have that, even if my friend has that. You can still help them understand how they can pursue their interests within the limits that are real. But there was no way, we weren't going to have her, signed up in full on equestrian and boarding a horse somewhere. That was never going to happen. It just wasn't a possibility, nor was it, frankly, a desire for us. Might have been for her, right? So you look at what the limits are and you still try to explore, is there something that they can do here They might not be able to get the top tier thing that they want, but they might be able to adapt. So you're teaching them adaptation. You're teaching them accepting futilities that actually mature us. You're teaching them resiliency. And these are all such important skills. So sometimes we have to deal with the no. That's not going to work. We're not going to be able to do that. What can we do then?
I know what you're saying is correct.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if we've seen a cultural shift or if it's, maybe just the neighborhoods that I find myself in. But I have really found that there are more and more families that are providing exceptional amounts of
Yes.
things for their children
Yeah, it's
that
too
I
much.
that I didn't see, in our generation
No, it's
growing
too much.
up.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's coming from there being more wealth? Do you think it's an issue for our children that they're getting as many things as they're getting?
Yeah, it is an issue. I mean, we have a bit of a challenge these days with entitled children, and
Hmm.
entitled children often come from situations where parents have, you know, overindulge certain things, right? And then they don't know the importance of no, right? They will learn it sometime because nobody gets everything that they want in life. You will face your futilities. The things I try to encourage parents is I would way rather my children, face a futility, a tough futility when they're like 12 and they're living with me than when they're like 22 and they're out on their own and they don't know what to do, right? And they don't have me right there with them, right? So, facing challenging things when we're young is actually kind of a bonus because you have the support of your parents right there. But yeah, people, I think where it's coming from is a lot of, there's a lot of materialism pushed on us. There's a lot of, you're going to be happy if you have this latest and greatest. And also, there's a lot of guilt in parents, right? Parents are
Where's
very
that
busy.
coming from? These
We're
kids are
very,
growing up with so much around them.
Mhm. Yeah,
What are we feeling guilty about by saying no or I mean, it's
people
a
are,
very
yeah,
curious conversation because teaching our children about financial literacy, from what I'm hearing, is so much about parents having their own control and not spoiling their children in some ways, you know?
yeah. You can
And I
never,
don't love to use that word, but
mhm.
it,
Well,
it,
yeah, you can never spoil your children with love, right?
yes.
There's never a limit to that, right? But you can with things. And children actually, as much as they like their things, what they really want and value is connection and attention from their parents. And where it's coming from, where the guilt is coming from, in particular, where we live in the lower mainland, housing is very expensive. Often it requires two parents working hard just to maintain a home these days. And that's if you're lucky enough to have enough to even get a house. And so we've got really busy, overwhelmed parents. And the easiest thing is to do it themselves, like we were talking about before,
Hmm.
and to buy something to make your kid feel happy quickly,
Hmm.
right? And you feel kind of bad. I wasn't there for them. I didn't get to go to their, all their soccer games or whatever it is. But, the thing I would say to parents is, because I don't want parents beating up on themselves,
Hmm.
I want to inspire them is that, remember that the quality of the connection with you as the parent is going to be the most valuable thing for the child. It's way more valuable than anything, right? So if you take a few moments and you talk to them and you give them some attention, whether it be around, financial conversations or just any kind of conversation, that's going to go a lot farther than something, a thing.
Yeah. So, that's really, really good advice, and I like that you don't want to beat up on the parents.
No.
But I think it's an important topic. When did you start talking to your children about university and saving for it and
Mhm.
participation potentially in the cost?
Yeah, well, I mean, little by little, we always talk to them about university, right? We always talk to them about being part of their long-term savings. And so, And we, as a value for us was value education. And it doesn't mean our children had to go to university, but they were expected to do some sort of post-secondary education and training, right? So whatever their choice was. And we, had the registered education savings and plan and stuff like that. And we talked to them and showed them, like from a very young age, that this is what we were doing for them. And so I think it is an ongoing conversation. It's like scaffolding. You build one thing on top of the other. But I think too many people don't have those conversations. They might be doing it and the children don't even know they're doing it, or they're not involved in it. And so I really encourage people to involve their children from a young age.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. I've heard many different things, like having, children that are now 22 to 26 years old, similar age group to you. And when they were, around at the dinner table in high school and even in university, sometimes they'd say things like, oh, our friend so-and-so has a $200,000 fund that's theirs from school. Like you'd hear them throw out these things. And I thought, oh, that is so interesting, that and they would say, and what do we have? Right?
Not 200,000, but
and I found that very interesting as a financial advisor, because when you save for your children's education through an RESP, they are the beneficiary, but you are the owner of the account. So the parent has all the control around how that money's handed out. Yet some parents would just say to their children, well, this is your money, and then they would go around school bragging about it. So, I see some learning in that. But really the other learning is the idea that it's a secret. When you talk about where your husband came from and how this is maybe things that like there's this idea that you don't talk about money, for example. That it's a cultural in some families and other cultures as well.
And it is. And I mean, that's a whole conversation, right? People's, reticence to talk about money, and sometimes the way they see it as a dirty conversation, when in fact it's a very healthy conversation. But it's okay to also teach children about privacy, right? And it doesn't have to be secrecy. It's about privacy, right? And what, who you would want to share information with and why. And, so if you're giving a very young child information saying you have $200,000 in this account, they're not going to understand, and they might be blurting that out, right? But as they go older, you might talk about that it's something they can share if they want, but to be thoughtful about whom they share it with, because other people may not have that same opportunity, and they might feel sensitive to the fact that, your parents have saved more towards your education than they were able to. So it's also teaching them the social aspects.
Yeah. So I think this is a really great takeaway that I'm learning from this for our audience is that, there would be some boundaries your family would create about what you want to share. Okay. I mean, I have families with high levels of wealth that their children still don't know, and their adult children are older than I am, for example. Right. And there is that privacy aspect. It's very individual, but talking about it is not, it's not a bad thing to talk about it. It's a very, very important, and for some families, more is off limits than others. And that's very personal. But having that dialogue, what I am hearing, is so important when we're raising our children. And, there's this sort of concept too about value-based discussions around it, right? So parental modeling, this is really important, everyone. Parental modeling, such as demonstrating savings habits, discussing spending decisions, and explaining trade-offs, has repeatedly been identified as one of the most influential mechanisms shaping adult financial competence. Right. Parental modeling.
Yeah, exactly. And so, when we were talking, I was thinking, and we talk to our children, right? And I think I had, the advantage of having, even though I didn't come from any wealth, I had a mother who was, practical and shared information. And then becoming a therapist and being a child and family therapist, I had the advantage of kind of understanding the psycho-emotional aspects of this as well, right? So we, brought our kids up in a real way of having these conversations. But my children often say that their peers don't have this information. And what was great, my daughter told me the other day, was one of her friends, I guess she was talking a bit about investments, my daughter and stuff. And her friend said, you know a lot about this stuff. And my daughter said, yeah, I'm really interested in it. And then she said, if I take you out for lunch, will you teach me about it? And I thought, wow, good job. Good job to my mom, good job to me, good job to my daughter, right? That, my daughter was absolutely, yeah. So there she is sharing information with her friends. But I encourage parents that it's never too late to have these conversations. Even if you're just coming into your financial literacy now, even if you kind of look back and you think, oh, I messed this up, or this didn't go well, or I wish I'd done that, or it's too late now. It's not. Even if your children are adult children now, you can still have these conversations because there's there's a whole piece ahead of estates and the conversation's ongoing in a different way. So never think it's too late to begin having conversations within a family about money.
Yes. And more importantly, if you haven't been having the conversations, it's time to start.
Yeah.
Okay. So as an example, let's just say that your children are approaching university.
Mhm.
It's probably a great time to start talking about what do you think it's going to cost to go to university? Should we start, because really, I would say that when kids hit about 16, when they get their first job, that's when they start wanting to spend money. Something happens.
Mhm. Yes.
They start to want things. They want things their friends have. They realize that it's not a bottomless pit, the parents, and they start to care. And that's a great time if you've not done it. Okay, so what do you say to the listener who might have come from a family background where money was off topic, and they've listened to this and they are going, okay, I want to start today. Okay,
Mhm.
what do you say to that person? Where's a really good place to start with this financial literacy for children?
Well, it's having the financial literacy yourself, right? So, seeking a financial advisor and getting your own understanding of your finances, and then being able to start, so get yourself grounded first,
Mm-hmm.
and then start to think about what your values are and the values you want to pass on to your children. And then it gets into the practical stuff of, helping them understand. There's simple concepts like, one of the concepts we used with our children was, if you don't have the money, you don't spend the money. Right? And so we'd always say that to them from a young age. And we'd say, like, the only three things we said that, this was our thing that we said that we feel is worth putting on credit, right? Is, your education, right? A vehicle, because it's just so hard to buy a vehicle without it, and a home. And if other than that, if you don't have money, if you don't have the money, you don't spend it. That's a simple concept. So you can start there with simple concepts, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very true. Very true. That's great. That's great. I have here some different ways parents can engage their children in financial literacy and responsibility and money conversations. So I want you to add to this, but just before we sign off, one of them is skin in the game, right? And you did talk about that, but
Yeah.
I have found when children are, especially in teenage and university years, and and they start to get really good at something too, whether it's becoming really, really passionate about horseback riding, or maybe, they're a top hockey player and they break their stick once every other game. Do you know how expensive those hockey sticks are?
They're costly.
Right. But my point is that when you want something, And you want to help your children have that because it is important, and they've worked towards, it's not frivolous, like a new bicycle, or maybe they want to do a trip with a friend and go see a concert or something. And so skin in the game to me is, hey, if you want to pay for a portion of it and you save for it, then we will help contribute. And then things aren't so off limits, but then they become, it's delayed gratification, and they have a say in it, and all of those pieces come along, right?
Absolutely.
And then choices. I have choices here as different ways you can engage your children in financial literacy, and responsibility is to talk to them about choices that you're making,
Yes.
and that's not hard to do around a dinner table, along the way. And I could think of a choice that's hard. Big one. Can you afford to go away to university, or do you need to stay home and go to a local university?
Right.
I mean, that should resonate with people because, their friends are all off here, there, and everywhere. And it's a very significant difference. But it might be one that says, hey, if you really want to go away, then let's look at a plan. Let's look at how we can make that happen for you.
Yeah.
And then there's, skin in the game. But
Absolutely.
don't leave it till, I hate to say this. I think a lot of parents leave it until their children are applying. And sometimes the children are applying. They'll be like, well, why can't I go to NYU? Right? They don't know that NYU is $100,000. Nobody
Right.
told them that. Nobody
Yeah.
gave them any limits, right?
Yeah. So it's having those conversations as early as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Alyson, I have a key question that I ask everybody that comes on this podcast. The purpose of this podcast is for women to teach other women from our learned experiences, because we don't know our blind spots, but we can learn from each other and try to limit those blind spots. So I like to ask every guest this question. What has been one of your most influential or significant decisions or experiences that has had the most effect on your financial journey?
Well, I think for myself, I mean, it was having the ability to have that delayed gratification and to be able to save money as a young adult and get into the real estate market. Not to wheel and deal, because that's not my nature, but to get my foothold in it, right? And because I had the ability to save and do that, I remember when I was able to buy that first, little apartment, and it was mine, and it just was so exciting. Well, it was ours. My husband and I got it. And so I think, having the discipline enough to get to that point, and then that did change the world for me, in the sense that, yes, it was stressful. You have mortgage, etc. But it was, I had skin in the game, right? I had an investment now. And when you invest in yourself, and nobody just gave me that, I earned it, right? And I was, able to keep moving up in that market, which helped us out a lot, right? When we look back on it, a lot.
I love that. I just love that.
Yeah.
So you, Alyson, from a young age, worked hard, put money away, and were able, without any help from parents or anything, maybe a little bit of government, CMHC financing, you were able to buy a property young, and that has now leveraged you to having a beautiful home in North Van.
Yeah.
And that might not have happened, And I
Yeah.
love that story, because there's this idea out there that children will never be able to afford a home. And I don't believe that at all. I just don't.
And you set your goals, and there's
And you
ways
set your goals.
to do it. And you might have to adapt those goals in reality. When you're faced with different things, you might want something and then have to compromise it. But that's okay too. That's just part of the process, right? And so setting the goals, following through, having some discipline and ability to delay the gratification, and getting a foothold and getting yourself invested. And don't buy into the it can't happen for me, right? It's, how am I going to make this happen for me?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
You are so wise. What an incredible conversation.
Thank you, Jenny. Yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
What an incredible conversation. And I want to make sure that any of our listeners can find you, Alyson Jones.
Yes. Yes.
So where do we find you? I mean,
Well,
I
I've
know where
got,
to knock on your door, but I
yes.
won't give that away.
Yeah. No, you can, my website is alysonjones.ca. So www.alyson, ALYSONJONES.ca. And it's got my information there about a lot of the speaking engagements, media that I do, as well as the practice that I run, and maybe some tips and things for parents around just practical parenting ideas, right?
Yeah.
So thank you, Jenny, for this great opportunity. I've really enjoyed this conversation as well. Happy to
Yeah.
have it.
I can't wait to have you back.
Yay, I
There's
can't wait
more
to come back.
wisdom to
Yeah,
come. And for
excellent.
those of you listening, if today's episode helped you gain a bit more clarity on your own financial journey, please take a moment to support the show. The best way to help us grow is to subscribe on your favorite platform and leave a review. It truly helps other savvy women find this community. Don't forget to download this episode so you can revisit these questions during your next financial planning session. Thank you again for spending your time with us today. Remember, your resources are your tools. Use them to create meaning and build your best life. I'm Jennie Weeks, and I'll see you in the next episode.